Today we're talking about what may be the most common question I get in my business. So strap in, because it's a doozy. We're talking house. As always, we're going to be talking about Toronto in this video. But these principles are going to apply pretty much across Canada. One of the most common questions I get almost on a daily basis in my business is, how much money do I actually need to buy property, and where does that money come from? I don't want to scare anybody, but we're talking about a little bit of math. Well, you see, the quadratic formula and the Bernoulli principle with the ideal gas law. I'm just kidding. Bear with me. It'll be easy, I promise. You'll follow along. There's a few elements of the money that you need to know about before you buy, and the first one is the down payment. So how much do you need? Well, this is going to vary depending on how much property you're buying. The more expensive, the more you need. But we can get somewhat specific with it. Here in Toronto, if you're looking at a property under $500,000, then you need a minimum of 5% down payment. If you're looking at a property between $500,000 and $1 million, then that value in between there is 10% minimum. Over $1 million, you need a minimum of 20% down. Now, when you start crunching those numbers, 10% of $500,000 is $50,000. That's a lot of dough. You might ask yourself, where on earth does that come from? Well, we'll start with the obvious. Some people save really well, they're in a fortunate position, and they're just able to accumulate that money on their own. That's great! Nice job! But what happens if you don't have it on hand? Most people who have never bought before in Toronto, they're getting help from a family member or a relative. It may not be the entirety of the down payment, but they are getting help, and it's actually more common than not to get that help. This city is expensive and it's hard to buy in. Use what's available to you. So we know how much you need for a down payment, and we know where it might come from. What's the next piece? We got to start talking about mortgages. The mortgage is what's going to cover the remaining cost of the property after you've already put your down payment in. Let's say you buy a $500,000 property and you have a $100,000 down payment. There's still $400,000 that need to be accounted for. Where does that come from? Well, you're going to get a mortgage. Hey, you could pay for the whole thing in cash, and if you can, good on ya. Let's assume for a second that you need a mortgage. Mortgages are a little tougher than they used to be just a couple of years ago because lenders aren't giving out as much money and they're making it harder for people to get that money. For your mortgage, you're gonna have to qualify for it first. What does that entail? Well, they're going to take a lot of factors into consideration, including your income, your debt, your savings, any investments. These will all play a factor. People used to go to banks most often to get their money for a mortgage, and a lot of people still go to them. But they're making it harder and harder to get that money, so people are looking elsewhere as well. This is stuff we'll touch on in a future episode. The most important thing when considering buying a property is that you do it responsibly. Look, you may have the down payment. You may be able to get the mortgage. You may actually be able to buy the place. But what happens if you can't cover your monthly costs? Be responsible. Be smart. There's no use buying a place and it won't benefit you unless you're smart about it. There's more options than you may realize available at your disposal. Sometimes you just have to get a little creative. I would really recommend speaking to me or another real estate expert that you may know to talk about your options. It's really important to know where you stand in this market. What you find out may surprise you. Join us next week when I light myself on fire and do a backflip off a 20-story building. Is he telling the truth? Is he? Is he? No, I'm not. It'd be cool though.